This little eBay turbo is too small for a big block. What happens when we go big? This video is actually a follow-up to our original Turbo Titan series, where we compared a 4.8 liter to a big block 454, both equipped with the same eBay GT45 turbo. In that test, take a look up here if you haven't already seen it, we ran the 4.8 liter and the big block both with the same turbo. Now the results show that that turbo was a little small for both combinations, but definitely for the 454. Now we've already followed up in part 2 with a turbo upgrade for the smaller 4.8 liter, and it worked well. So the question is, what happens when we install a bigger turbo on the 454? Guys, make sure to stick around to the end. I'm going to give you an update on our Big Bang Big Block Chevy. That's where we take a stock bottom end Gen 6 454, add two S475 turbos, and turn it up till something breaks. But it's at the end. Our big block test motor was the same one run in part 1 of our Turbo Titan series. The only upgrade to the short block of our Gen 6 Junkyard 454 was an increase in ring gap. We also installed a healthy comp cam, a set of Dart Pro 1 oval port heads, and a single plane EFI intake from Edelbrock. This combination was fed from the same 80-pound injectors we ran on the 4.8 and the same Holley HP management system. The one area where they differed was in our choice of turbos. Unfortunately for us, that T6 S475 from Summit Racing wasn't available when we ran the big block. But don't worry, we had a backup plan. And our backup plan was, get those comments ready, a billet wheel S480 BorgWarner from LJMS. That's right, a bigger turbo. Now why didn't we run the same ones? As I said, the S475 wasn't available, so we had to come up with an alternative. But there's more. This S480 featured a billet 80mm compressor wheel, and it was a T4. Not only was it a T4, but that 92mm turbine wheel was housed with a 1.25 AR. That's right, a T4 and a tighter AR. What do you think? Is that going to show up in the back pressure? Well, one thing we know for sure. This combination made less back pressure than that GT45 on the big block, but it made more back pressure than the T6 turbo on the 4.8. Is that going to mean it's a happy medium, that it works well on the big block? Let's find out. Okay guys, if we remember from our last test run with the GT45 on this 454 big block Chevy, we produced, a little over 700 horsepower, 707, and some pretty good torque numbers, 756 foot-pounds of torque. And that was at peak boost in this area of around 9.9 pounds, and then we had a falling boost curve, which we'll get into when we talk about the boost curves. But after installation of the larger billet wheel S480 turbo from LJMS, it's a BorgWarner deal. We take a look at that. We see this. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why did the other turbo make more power? Why did the GT45 make more turbo down low or make more power down low? That's because we started out at a lower boost pressure on this run on the S480 turbo, about 8.5 pounds, and we'll show that on the boost curve when we get into those. But we were able to have a nice, perfectly flat boost curve from our electronic controller on the S480 because it had much lower back pressure, using that particular spring in the wastegate. So this was our starting point, and then we obviously with that S480 had a lot more power to give, so we did what everybody did and we turned the boost up. So we turned that up to around 10 pounds, and we were up in the 818 horsepower range, and torque and horsepower were very similar on these, about 818 on this big block. So once again, if a little bit of boost is good, then even more is better. We didn't crank this thing all the way up, but we did run more than this. So we turned the boost up again, around 12 pounds, and we were right near 900 horsepower, 897 or so. Torque was 865 foot-pounds. We also added another degree or two of timing on that run. We were running all of this on E85, so it definitely liked the timing. So I think our last run was a little bit more boost. I ran 12.6 pounds, and so we were able to get, I just wanted to get over the 900 horsepower mark. We obviously knew that the turbo would do that. It'll support probably 12 or 1300 horsepower, although I don't know on this particular combination. It might have too much, the back pressure even on that S480 might be a little high to get up to those maximum numbers. It probably would be a little bit happier on a smaller motor, but it easily did this and made peak of 914 horsepower and 910 foot-pounds of torque. So again, plenty of power there from that bigger turbo, and it just goes to show you that eBay GT45 turbo works well at low boost, even on these bigger motors. But if you're trying to make power, you need to put the right size turbo on this, and this S480 billet wheel deal was a much better match for this 454. And again, I'm sorry we didn't put the S475 on. It's just time and availability for when we're doing these dyno tests. And we actually ran this 454 at a much different time than we ran that 48, so it wasn't going to ever be a direct comparison. But as it turns out, I just wanted to show putting these bigger turbos on these motors and reducing the back pressure is definitely beneficial for power. Now that we've taken a look at the power and torque curves on the 454 with this bigger turbo, let's take a look at the boost curves. Okay, if we take a look at the boost pressure versus back pressure curves, you'll remember from the previous video, and if you haven't watched that, you need to go do that so you can get all this information. The boost pressure versus back pressure curves supplied by that smaller GT45 turbo on the 454, we always had more back pressure than boost pressure. So down here, we had almost 11 pounds of back pressure and 9 pounds of boost pressure, but as the RPM increased, our boost pressure dropped to 8.3, but the back pressure rose to 22.5. So that's a big difference in boost pressure versus back pressure. That's not a very favorable relationship there on the GT45. Definitely too small of a turbo for that 454. But if we take a look at our boost pressure and back pressure curves, we can compare these two. This is the Summit Racing, or the S480 BorgWarner billet wheel turbo. And so we had a nice flat boost curve on that one. We actually started lower and ended about the same, and that's why I did that, because at that boost pressure, the boost pressure was the same out at the power peak. And so I wanted to kind of compare that, and it'll look like that the GT45 has more boost down low, which it did because it had a falling boost curve. That's not a function of it being more responsive. It's just that it has a falling boost curve, and we weren't controlling it properly in the last test. We could work on that maybe a little bit. But in either event, we see we had a nice flat boost curve from the S480, and we still had a slightly rising boost curve, although it had less back pressure than boost pressure, up to 4,000 RPM. And then out here at past 5,700, about 5,800 RPM, we had 8.7 pounds of boost pressure and 14.4 pounds of back pressure. So still more back pressure than boost pressure. Now let's take a look and see what happened. Obviously with the S480 turbo, we were able to turn it up. So now let's go up in boost a bit. So we'll go up to like 10 pounds. So you can see both the boost pressure went up. We'll pick the peak out here. Went up from 8.7 to 10. Back pressure went up from 14.4 to 15.9. So kind of a similar relationship there, which we like to see. We don't want to see a wildly disparaging increase in back pressure as we went up in boost pressure. So now let's go up again We'll see about going up here to like 12 pounds. So let's, yeah, we'll go up to 12 pounds. So again, we went from right at 10 to 12, exactly 2 pounds. And we went up from 15.9 pounds of back pressure to 18.9. So we went up 2 pounds of boost and went up 3 pounds of back pressure. So at that elevated flow rate and boost pressure, we're starting to see a slightly more increase in back pressure on that S480 turbo. And then our final run, if we take a look at that, of 12.6 pounds, where we made 900 horsepower. Yeah, boost pressure climbed, you know, from 12 to 12.6. Back pressure climbed from, let's see, 18.6. Yeah, climbed by about 0.8 of a pound of boost, so a little bit more than the boost pressure climbed, as we saw in the previous run with the 12 pounds. But as we see here, even at 12.6 pounds of boost, we had less back pressure than the GT45 had at 8.3 pounds of boost. So we still had a lot less back pressure even with this bigger turbo on the 454, which again is always beneficial. Size the turbo for the application. Big motor, big turbo, lots of exhaust flow, because that's what ultimately dictates it. It's the flow rate of the exhaust, the power output of the motor versus what you're having to flow that through. In this case, it's the hot side of the turbo, because that's the big thing. Power output, hot side flow, that's what ultimately determines the back pressure. And then these other things make a minor difference. Things like people talk about overlap and cam timing and the shape of the exhaust manifolds and all that stuff. Those are much more minor compared to the power output versus the flow rate of that hot side of that turbo. So now let's jump over to our conclusions. Okay guys, what did we learn? Well, a better question is, what do you guys think? I mean, let me know in the comments. What do you think about the upgrade from the eBay GT45 turbo to that billet wheel S480 on our 454? Was it a good match? Now, I think it was. I think the S480 was a much better turbo on the 454 than that T6 S475 was on the 4.8. If you haven't seen that video, check here. But that S480 not only allowed us to make good power on the 454, but it also had just the right amount of back pressure, meaning it would also be responsive. So remember, big turbo, big power. Low back pressure, big power. Just the right amount of back pressure, good response. Now let's take a look at the update on our Big Bang 454. Okay, now that we've finished that test, we can talk about the update on our Big Bang 454. Now some of you might be asking, what's a Big Bang 454? Well, the Big Bang series started way back in 2010 when I ran the first one on a 4.8 liter LS. Now the Big Bang Theory motors, what I do is take a stock bottom end, meaning a stock block, stock crank, stock rod, stock pistons, add extra ring gap. Then I topped it with heads, cam, and intake, put 2 turbos on, and turn them up till something in the bottom end breaks. What I wanted to find out was, how much power can those stock components in the bottom end really take? Well, right now, the record stands with a 6 liter LY6. That Gen 4 stock block motor, we were able to make 1,543 horsepower at 29 pounds of boost. And the cool thing is, that motor is still alive. We topped out our 3-bar map sensor, so I think there's more left. But right now, that's the official record. On the big block side, we want to find out if a stock bottom end Gen 6 454, stock block, crank, rods, pistons, extra ring gap, can dethrone that LS. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Can a junkyard big block beat a junkyard LS? Can it make more than 1,543 horsepower? Well, this combination that I ran in the last video, that's actually my Big Bang combination. I am going to make a few changes. It has the stock bottom end with extra ring gap, but I'm going to replace those Dart oval port heads with a set of AFR rec port heads. And the reason for that is I only have a rec port single plane EFI intake. So I want to combine that with a rec port set of heads. In this last test, I ran the rec port intake with an oval port head and a big mismatch. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Did I leave power on the table? But the question is, after I do all of this, what's going to happen? Can that big block withstand all that power? Can it dethrone the LS? Can it make more than 1,543 horsepower? Let me know in the comments. But make sure, hey, hit that like button, hit the share button, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff because it helps me do the videos. Thanks for watching.